The Dominion had a phrase they used when a world finally gave up. The candle accepts the snuffer. It meant the moment a defending force laid down its arms, the instant resistance turned to surrender. In 10,000 years and 900 conquests, the Dominion had snuffed 900 candles, and every single one had in the end accepted the snuffer. Every world surrenders. That was the law of the galaxy, as certain as gravity. You fight, you lose, and at the end, when there's no hope left, you surrender, because surrender is what living things do when the alternative is death. I was on the wall at Kestrel Station the night humanity broke that law. The night we proved there was a thing the Dominion's 10,000 years had never once encountered. And I'm going to tell you about it because I was there, and because somebody who was there should. We didn't surrender. That's the whole story if you want it in 3 words. The galaxy expected us to accept the snuffer like everyone always had, and instead, with no hope, no fleet, no escape, nothing left at all, humanity reloaded one more time. Let me tell you what that looked like. My name is Sergeant Cole Iverson, and at the time I was a nobody, a garrison soldier on a nothing world called Temperance, at the far edge of human space, manning a defensive station that everyone assumed would never see a real fight. Kestrel Station, a ground fortress on a cold, gray world, built into a ridge above the only valley wide enough to land an invasion. There were 800 of us. Garrison troops. Not the best humanity had, the best were elsewhere, on the core worlds, on the ships. We were the leftovers, the frontier guard, the people you station on a rock at the edge of everything because somebody has to, and it might as well be the soldiers nobodies grooming for greatness. I want to be honest about that because it matters. We weren't heroes. We weren't elite. We were 800 ordinary soldiers on a cold rock, and most of us had joined up for the steady pay and the structure and the simple life of guarding a place nothing ever happened to. We drilled, we complained about the food, we counted the days. We were the most ordinary soldiers in the whole human military, and that's exactly who was standing on the wall when the Dominion came. I think that's important. The galaxy tells the story now like Kestrel Station was defended by the finest humanity had. It wasn't. It was defended by us. The ordinary ones, the leftovers. And maybe that's the most human thing about the whole story, that when the test came, it didn't come to the best of us. It came to the average of us. And the average of us turned out to be enough. I need to tell you about the Dominion, because you have to understand what we were facing, and why surrender was supposed to be the only sane choice. The Dominion was the oldest and largest power in the galaxy, 10,000 years of unbroken expansion, 900 conquered worlds, a war machine so vast and so practiced that resistance against it had become almost ceremonial. You didn't beat the Dominion. Nobody beat the Dominion. What you did when the Dominion came for your world was fight long enough to satisfy your honor and then surrender because the Dominion's terms for surrender were survivable. That was their genius. They weren't cruel conquerors. They were efficient ones. Fight them and you died. Surrender to them and you lived as a subject world, a province taxed and governed and absorbed but alive. Your people survived. Your city stood. You lost your freedom, but you kept your lives. So every world surrendered. Of course they did. The Dominion had engineered the math so that surrender was always the rational choice, fight to the death and lose everything, or yield and keep your lives. 900 worlds faced with that math had all reached the same answer. The candle accepts the snuffer. It wasn't cowardice. It was sense. When you cannot win and surrender means your children live, you surrender. Any reasonable being would. The Dominion counted on it. Their whole strategy, their whole 10,000-year machine, was built on the certainty that every defending force at the moment of true hopelessness would do the reasonable thing and yield. They didn't even bring enough troops to truly exterminate a defending world. They didn't need to. They brought enough to make the situation hopeless, and then they waited for the hopelessness to do their work, for the defenders to run the math and accept the snuffer. It always worked. For 10,000 years it always worked. Humanity was World 901. The Dominion came to Temperance because of where it sat, not because of what it was. Tit was a way station world, strategically placed on the approach to the human core, take Tit, and you had a staging ground for the real invasion, the push toward Earth itself. So the Dominion sent a force to take it, not their whole army but enough to make it hopeless. A landing force that outnumbered our 800 garrison troops by 100 to 1, backed by orbital support that could glass the whole valley if they chose, commanded by a Dominion war leader named Vorr San, who had personally snuffed 40 candles across 3 centuries, and had never once failed to make a defending force surrender. He expected Kestrel Station to surrender too. Why wouldn't he? We were 800 ordinary garrison troops against a 100 to 1 force with orbital support. The math was the same math it had always been, the math that had broken 900 worlds: fight and die, or surrender and live. Vorr San had run that math 40 times and watched 40 defending forces reach the only sane conclusion. He had no reason to think Kestrel Station would be any different. He sent us the standard demand, the same one the Dominion had sent 900 times. It came over the comms to our command center, translated into clean human standard, calm and certain and almost kind. Defenders of Kestrel Station, you are surrounded, outnumbered, and without hope of relief. Your fleet cannot reach you. Your situation is militarily hopeless, and you know this as well as we do. The Dominion offers you the terms it has offered 900 worlds: lay down your arms and live. Your soldiers will be spared. Your world will be governed, not destroyed. Your families will survive. Resistance can only end in your deaths and change nothing. Accept these terms and the killing need not begin. You have until dawn to accept the Snuffer. I was in the command center when that came through. I watched our commander, Colonel Imani Reyes, a tough, tired, decent woman who'd spent her career on frontier postings just like us. I watched her read it, and I watched her do the thing that started everything. She laughed. Not a bitter laugh, not a brave-faced laugh. A real, surprised, almost delighted laugh. The laugh of someone who's just been told something so wrong it's funny. They think we're going to surrender, she said. She looked around the command center at all of us. They actually think we're going to surrender. Now I want to be careful here because the story gets told wrong. People here, they refuse to surrender against hopeless odds, and they think it was about pride, about honor, about some grand human refusal to bend the knee. And it wasn't, not really. Colonel Reyes wasn't being proud. She was being accurate. And the distinction is the whole heart of what happened at Kestrel Station, so let me get it right. Here's what they don't understand, Reyes said, and she pulled up the tactical display, the position of the Dominion fleet, the approach to the human core that Tit guarded. They think this is the same as the 900 worlds before us. They think the math is fight and die or surrender and live. And for those 900 worlds, that math was true. Surrendering really did save their people. So surrendering was the right call, and I'd have made it too. She tapped the display, the long line of approach behind us toward the core, toward Earth. But the math is different here, and they can't see it because they've never had to. Tit isn't a destination. It's a doorway. If we surrender Kestrel Station, the Dominion doesn't just take Tit. They take the staging ground for the push to the core. They use this world to stage the invasion of Earth. Our surrender doesn't save human lives. Our surrender spends them, every human life on every world behind us, all the way to Earth, because we handed the Dominion the doorway they need to reach them. She looked around at us. For 900 worlds, surrender meant their children lived. For us, surrender means everyone's children die, just later, just further back, on worlds that'll never know it started here. The Dominion's whole strategy depends on surrender being the choice that saves lives. And here, only here, because of where we're standing, surrender is the choice that costs them. The command center was silent. So we're not going to surrender, Colonel Reyes said. Out of pride, out of arithmetic. The same arithmetic that made 900 worlds yield is the arithmetic that makes us hold, because we're not standing on a world. We're standing in a doorway, and there are 400 million people behind us who don't even know we exist, and the only thing between them and the Dominion is 800 ordinary garrison troops on a cold gray rock. She straightened. Vorsan thinks he's snuffing a candle. He's wrong. He's not at a candle, he's at a door. And we are going to hold the door. I'm not going to pretend everyone was ready to die for that. That's another way the story gets told wrong. Like all 800 of us heard the colonel's speech and stood up as one and shouted defiance. It wasn't like that. We were ordinary soldiers. Most of us had families. Most of us had joined the garrison precisely because it was safe, because nothing ever happened on a frontier rock. And now we were being told that nothing was about to happen very much, that we were standing in a doorway 100-to-1 army wanted to come through, and that surrender, the thing that had saved 900 worlds, wasn't an option for us, because of where we happened to be standing. There was fear, there was a lot of fear. I felt it myself, cold in my gut the whole night. There were soldiers who argued with the colonel quietly that the math didn't have to be our problem, that we were 800 people and the core worlds had their own defenses, that holding the door was a job for heroes, and we were just garrison troops who'd drawn a bad posting. And Colonel Reyes listened to every one of them, because she was that kind of commander, and she didn't order anyone to die. What she did instead was tell the truth and let us choose. I won't lie to you, she told us, all 800 of us, gathered in the cold of the main hall that night before dawn. We are not going to win. I want that clear. There is no version of tonight where the Dominion lands 100-to-1 force and 800 garrison troops defeat them. That's not what holding the door means. Holding the door doesn't mean winning. It means making them pay so much for this doorway that the cost changes their plans. The Dominion's whole machine runs on conquest being cheap. They make it hopeless. The defenders surrender. They take the world for almost nothing and move on. 900 worlds taken cheap. If we hold, if we make them fight for every meter of this station, if we make taking this doorway cost them more than any world has ever cost them, then we do two things. We delay the push to the core, buy time for the worlds behind us to prepare. And we teach the Dominion, for the first time in 10,000 years, that there's a kind of defender their math doesn't work on. A defender that doesn't accept the snuffer. She looked around at us hard and honest. That's what I'm asking, not to win, to hold the door and make it cost and probably die doing it. And I'm not going to order you to, because a thing like this you can't order it. It only means anything if it's chosen. So I'm asking. Anyone who wants to leave, there's a transport. It can run the blockade, maybe make it to the core. I'll give the codes to anyone who wants them. No shame, no record. Go home to your families. The rest of us will hold the door. She paused. Decide tonight, dawn's coming, and so are they. I'll tell you what I expected, and then I'll tell you what happened, because the gap between them is the thing I've never gotten over. I expected most of us to leave. I really did. We were ordinary soldiers, frontier garrison, the leftovers, people who'd chosen safety. The colonel had just told us honestly that staying meant dying for a doorway most of the galaxy would never know we held. She'd offered us a way out with no shame attached. And the math of leaving was the same comfortable math that had saved 900 worlds, your own life, your own family, weighed against a hopeless fight. I expected the transport to fill. I expected to watch most of Kestrel Station choose to live, and I wouldn't have blamed a single one of them, because the colonel was right that you couldn't order this, and I wasn't even sure that night what I'd choose myself. The transport left at dawn. It was empty. 800 ordinary garrison soldiers offered a way home with no shame, and not one of us took it. I watched the empty transport lift off into the gray dawn and run the blockade, carrying no one, because every single soldier on Kestrel Station had looked at the same math the colonel laid out, 400 million people behind us who didn't know we existed, a doorway only we could hold, and made the same impossible choice. Not because we were brave. I keep saying that because it's true. Because we weren't heroes, we were leftovers, ordinary people who'd chosen safe postings. But when it came down to it, when it was real, when the door was real and the 400 million were real, and the choice was actually in front of us, not one of us could be the person who walked through that door to safety knowing what walking through it would cost. That's the thing the Dominion never understood. That's the thing their 10,000 years of math couldn't account for. They thought surrender was about the survival calculation, your life against a hopeless fight. And for 900 worlds it had been. But they'd never once put the choice in front of a defender who was standing in a doorway, where surrender saved your life but cost everyone else's. They'd never met a defender who'd weighed their own survival against 400 million strangers and found their own survival lighter. They had no category for that. In 10,000 years, they had never needed one. The empty transport rose into the dawn, and 800 ordinary humans turned back to the wall and loaded their weapons, and watched the Dominion landing force begin to descend into the valley below Kestrel Station. 100 to 1, with orbital support, commanded by a war leader who had never once failed to make a defending force except the Snuffer. Colonel Reyes walked the wall as the Dominion came down. She stopped beside me, looked out at the descending army, the impossible odds, the hopeless math that wasn't hopeless the way they thought. "You know what the worst part is, Sergeant," she said quietly. "Vorsan out there, he still thinks we're going to surrender. He's watching us load our weapons and he's thinking, they're posturing, they'll fight a while for their honor and then accept the Snuffer like everyone always does. He cannot imagine that we mean it. 10,000 years, 900 worlds, and the one thing he's never seen is a defender who doesn't break." She checked her own weapon. "We're about to show him. And he's not going to understand it even while it's happening. That's the thing about teaching a lesson to something that's been right for 10,000 years. It doesn't learn easy. You have to teach it the hard way, all the way to the end." She looked at me. "It's going to be the worst night of our lives, Sergeant Iverson, and the most important one. You ready?" I wasn't. Nobody's ready for that. But I racked around into my weapon, and I looked out at the 100 to 1 army descending on 800 ordinary leftovers in a doorway, and I said the only thing there was to say. "No surrender, Colonel." She almost smiled. "No retreat, Sergeant." And down in the valley, the Dominion landing force touched the cold gray ground, and the worst and most important night in the history of the human frontier began. The first assault came an hour after dawn, and it was not really an assault. It was a test. Vorsan was still certain we'd break, and so he didn't commit his army. He sent a probing force up the valley, a fraction of his strength, the way you'd push gently on a door you expect to swing open. He wanted to feel us bend. He wanted to find the place where the garrison's resolve cracked, so he could lean into it and watch us accept the Snuffer like 900 worlds before us. We did not bend. I was on the eastern wall when that first probe came up the valley, and I want to tell you what it was actually like, because the histories make it sound clean and it was not clean. It was terrifying and loud and confusing, the way real fighting is. The Dominion troops came up the slope in their armored ranks, methodical, certain, and our wall opened up on them. 800 ordinary garrison soldiers firing for their lives, and the noise was like the world ending, and the smoke, and the screaming, and the awful concentration of trying to do your job while everything in your body wants to run. But here's the thing. We held. The probe came up and we broke it, not easily, not without losses, but we broke it, and the Dominion force fell back down the valley, and there was a silence after, and in that silence I understood something about Vorsan's mistake. He'd sent a probe because he expected to find a crack, a defending force that didn't really mean its defiance, that would bend at the first real pressure. And he hadn't found one, because we meant it. Every soldier on that wall had already made the choice the night before, had watched the empty transport rise and chosen freely to hold the door. There was no crack for Vorsan to find, because the thing that usually cracks in a defender, the will to keep fighting when it's hopeless, we'd already settled that. We'd settled it before the first shot. We weren't fighting until we broke. We'd already decided we wouldn't break. And a force that has already decided it won't break does not have the crack that all of Vorsan's experience taught him to find. Colonel Reyes came along the wall after the first probe, checking on us, and she stopped and looked down the valley where the Dominion was regrouping, and she said quietly, "He doesn't understand what just happened. He pushed on the door and the door didn't move, and right now he's deciding that he didn't push hard enough. He's going to push harder. He's going to keep pushing harder all day, all night, because in 10,000 years pushing harder has always worked." She turned to me. "And it's not going to work, Sergeant. Not because we're stronger than his army. We're not. He's going to take this station eventually. There's too many of them and too few of us. That was always true. But he's going to take it the expensive way. The way no world has ever made him take it. And every hour we make it cost, every assault we break, every meter he has to pay for in blood, that's the lesson. That's the door holding. That's 400 million people getting one more hour to live behind us, never knowing." She looked back down the valley. "Reload, Sergeant. He's coming again. He came again and again and again. I'm not going to walk you through every assault, because there were too many and they blur together in my memory now. A single endless gray day of smoke and noise and reloading. But I'll tell you the shape of it, because the shape is the story. Vorsan did exactly what Reyes said he'd do. He pushed harder. Each assault was bigger than the last, more of his force committed, more weight thrown against our wall. And each time we held, not because we were winning, we were never winning, but because we decided not to break, and a force that won't break can hold far longer than the math says it should. We lost people. God, we lost people. 800 became 700 became 600, the wall thinning, the dead piling up, and still we held, still we reloaded, still we made the Dominion pay for every meter. And the thing that kept us going, the thing I want you to understand, because it's the human heart of all of it, was each other. That's what the Dominion never factored. Their math was about individuals. Individual survival, individual fear, the individual calculation that made 900 worlds surrender. But we weren't fighting as individuals. We were fighting as each other's reasons. I held the eastern wall because the people beside me were holding it, and they held it because I was, and none of us could be the one who broke and left the others exposed. The same thing that had emptied the transport, none of us able to be the person who walked to safety knowing the cost, that same thing held the wall. We weren't each holding on for ourselves. We were each holding on for the person next to us, and that turns out to be a far stronger thing than holding on for yourself, because you can talk yourself into abandoning yourself, but you cannot talk yourself into abandoning the person beside you who's still fighting. There was a kid on the wall near me, Private Tam, couldn't have been 20, frontier garrison like the rest of us, joined for the steady pay. And somewhere in that long gray day, in a lull between assaults, white-faced and shaking, he said to me, "Sergeant, I'm scared. I'm so scared. I don't think I can keep doing this." And I didn't tell him to be brave because that's useless. You can't order brave. I told him the true thing. I said, "I know. I'm scared too. Everyone on this wall is scared. You're not doing this because you're not scared, Tam. You're doing it scared. That's the only kind of doing this there is." And then I said the thing that I think held the whole station together, the thing that was truer than any speech. "And you're not doing it for you. You're doing it for me, and I'm doing it for you, and that's how come neither of us can stop. Look down the line. Every one of them's holding on for the one next to them. That's the whole wall. That's the only thing holding the wall, not courage, each other." And Tam looked down the line at 600 scared ordinary people holding on for each other, and something steadied in him, and he reloaded, and he held. He held all day. He was holding when he died, late that night, still on the wall, still doing it scared, still doing it for the person next to him. I think about Private Tam a lot. He wasn't a hero. He told me he was scared and couldn't keep going, and then he kept going anyway for the person beside him until it killed him. If that's not the most human thing there is, I don't know what is. By nightfall, Vorsan finally understood that something was wrong. You could feel it in how the assaults changed. All day he'd pushed harder, certain that more pressure would find the crack. And the crack hadn't come. 600 of us became 500 became 4, the wall a charnel house, and still no surrender, still no break, still the door holding. And somewhere in there, Vorsan, a war leader who'd snuffed 40 candles, who had 10,000 years of dominion certainty behind him, Vorsan ran into the edge of his own understanding. He had pushed a defending force past every breaking point he'd ever seen, past the point where 900 worlds had all yielded, and the force had not yielded. And he did not know what to do with that, because his entire framework, his entire experience, his entire civilization strategy was built on the certainty that they would. He did a thing the Dominion almost never did. He called a parley. Mid-battle, he wanted to talk. Colonel Reyes took the parley, on the wall in the dark, with the station burning behind her and 400 of us left of the 800 who'd started. And Vorsan's voice came over the comm, and for the first time the certainty was gone from it, replaced by something I'd never heard from the Dominion, genuine confusion. "Defenders of Kestrel Station," he said, "I do not understand what you are doing. I have offered you the terms that 900 worlds accepted. I have shown you that your situation is hopeless. It is hopeless, you know this, you have lost half your force and you cannot win. Every law of war, every precedent in 10,000 years says you should have surrendered hours ago. Your continued resistance is not military. It accomplishes nothing. You will all die and I will take this station anyway, and your deaths will change nothing. So I ask you, not as an enemy but as one soldier to another, why? Why do you not accept the snuffer? What do you gain by dying when you could live?" And Colonel Reyes, exhausted, bloodied, 400 of her people dead around her, answered him. And her answer is carved on the memorial at Kestrel Station now, and I heard her say it live, and I'll carry it to my grave. "You think we're dying for nothing," she said. "You think because you'll take the station anyway our deaths change nothing. That's your whole mistake, Vorsan. That's the mistake of 10,000 years. She gestured back past the station toward the core, toward the 400 million. "We're not standing on a world. We're standing in a doorway. And every hour we hold it, every soldier you lose taking it, every day we delay your push to the core, that's not nothing. That's 400 million people getting time. Time to prepare, time to fortify, time to be ready for you in a way they wouldn't have been if we'd handed you this doorway cheap. You think we're a candle to be snuffed. We're not. We're a price. And we are making this doorway cost you more than any world has ever cost you, because the whole human core is behind us, and the longer we make you bleed here, the readier they are when you finally come." Her voice hardened. "You asked why we don't accept the snuffer. Here's why. Because for 900 worlds, surrender saved lives. For us, surrender spends them, every life behind us, all the way to Earth. You built a whole empire on conquest being cheap because defenders always break. And you finally found the defenders who won't, because we're standing in the one place where breaking costs more than dying. We're not braver than your 900 worlds, Vorsan. We're just standing somewhere different. And from where we're standing, the only sane choice, the only one is no surrender, no retreat, until you've paid more for this door than you can afford." There was a long silence on the comm. And then Vorsan said slowly, "You are buying time, with your lives, for people you will never meet, who do not know your names, who will never know what you did here." "Yes," Colonel Reyes said. "That is not a strategy I have a defense against," Vorsan said, and there was something almost like awe in it. "In 10,000 years, the Dominion has never needed one. We win because defenders value their own lives above the fight. We have never faced a defender who valued the fight above their own lives. I do not know how to break a thing that does not want to live more than it wants to hold." A pause. "I will take this station. You have not stopped that. But I begin to understand that I have already lost something here that I did not know could be lost. Your 900 predecessors taught my people that all defenders break. You are teaching us that there is a kind that does not. And once my people know that, Once the galaxy knows that humanity does not accept the Snuffer, every conquest after this one is different. You have made yourselves expensive, defenders of Kestrel Station, not just this world, all of humanity. You have taught the Dominion that we will have to pay in blood for every human doorway forever. That lesson will outlive every one of you. Another pause longer. I have never said this to a defending force in 300 years, but I will say it to you because you have earned it. The parley is ended. The assault will resume, and it will be an honor to take this station from soldiers like you. The final assault began at midnight, and it was everything Vorsan had left. He'd stopped probing for a crack. He understood now there was no crack, that we wouldn't break, that the only way to take Kestrel Station was to kill every last defender on the wall. So that's what he set out to do, the whole Dominion force, all of it, thrown against 400 exhausted ordinary humans in a burning station, in the dark, on a cold gray rock at the edge of human space. And we held, as long as we could, we held. The wall became something out of a nightmare, the dead and the living tangled together, the smoke and the noise and the endless reloading, 400 becoming 300 becoming 2, and still we held, still the door held, still every hour bled the Dominion and bought the core another hour of life. Colonel Reyes was everywhere on that wall, holding us together, and when she fell late, near the end, with maybe 200 of us left, when she fell still giving orders, still holding the door, and her last command, passed down the wall from soldier to soldier, was the only one that mattered. Hold. Make them pay. No surrender. We held after she died. That's the part I'm proudest of, and the part that hurts most. With the colonel gone, with 200 of us left, with the station burning and the Dominion pouring over the outer works, we held, because the choice she'd given us the first night was still ours, and we'd already made it, and no one's death unmade it. We held for her, and for each other, and for the 400 million who'd never know, and we made the Dominion pay for every single meter of that doorway, all the way to the end. I don't remember the end clearly. I was wounded by then, on the inner wall, firing until I couldn't, reloading one last time when there was almost nothing left to reload. The last thing I remember of the battle is a kind of strange peace, the peace of having nothing left to decide, of the choice long made, of holding the door to the very last with the people I'd held it with all along. No surrender, no retreat, one last time. And then it was over. Kestrel Station fell, the way Reyes always said it would, because 800 ordinary garrison troops were never going to defeat a 100-to-1 army. We didn't stop the Dominion. We were never going to stop the Dominion. But we'd done the thing we set out to do. We'd held the door long enough and made it cost enough to change everything that came after. And I lived barely, one of the few, to see what that everything was. I woke up 3 days later in a Dominion medical facility, which is the last place I expected to ever wake up, and the fact that I woke up there at all is the beginning of the part of the story nobody saw coming. Because Vorsan spared the survivors. There were 31 of us, out of the 800 who'd stood on the wall, 31 wounded, unconscious, scattered through the wreckage of Kestrel Station. And the Dominion war leader, who had every reason and every right by the law of war to finish us, did not. He had us gathered up and treated and healed in his own facility by his own people. And when I was strong enough to stand, his soldiers brought me to him, and I met, face to face, the being who had taken Kestrel Station from us. Vorsan was old. Older than I'd imagined, 3 centuries of war written into him. A tall, armored Dominion war leader with the bearing of someone who had never once doubted himself until very recently. He looked at me for a long time, the survivor of a wall he'd spent his whole army to take, and when he spoke, it was without triumph. 31, he said, out of 800. You held that doorway with 800 ordinary soldiers against my entire force for a full day and a full night. Do you know what that cost me, Sergeant? He told me the number. It was staggering. The taking of Kestrel Station had cost the Dominion more soldiers than the conquest of the last dozen worlds combined. 800 ordinary humans had made one doorway more expensive than 12 surrendered worlds. 10,000 years, Vorsan said quietly. 900 conquests, and not one of them cost me what your 800 cost me. The Dominion's entire strategy is built on conquest being cheap. Defenders break, worlds surrender, we take them for almost nothing. You broke that. Not the strategy on this world, the strategy itself. Because now my people have to reckon with the fact that there exists a kind of defender that does not break, and that this kind of defender is human, and that every human doorway from here to your homeworld may cost what this one cost. He shook his great head slowly. I came to snuff a candle. I have spent my army to take a single doorway, and in doing so I have taught my entire civilization that the road to the human core is the most expensive road in the galaxy. That is not a victory, Sergeant. That is the most costly thing the Dominion has done in 10,000 years. I want to explain what actually happened strategically, because it's the thing that makes Kestrel Station matter, and it's not what you'd think. We didn't stop the Dominion at Kestrel Station. I want to be honest about that, the way Colonel Reyes was always honest with us. 800 garrison troops did not defeat a galactic empire. The Dominion took Tit. The doorway fell. By the narrow military measure, we lost. But the delay, the full day and night we held, the staggering cost we extracted, that delay did two things, and both of them changed history. The first was time. While we held the doorway, the human core worlds behind us, who had not even known the Dominion was at Tit until our distress signals reached them, used the time we bought to prepare, to fortify, to move fleets, ready defenses, brace for the invasion they now knew was coming. The day and night we held translated into weeks of warning for the worlds behind us, and weeks of warning in war is the difference between being caught unready and being ready. Every hour 800 ordinary soldiers held that wall was an hour the human core spent getting ready to meet the Dominion as something other than a surprised and undefended target. We didn't stop the invasion. We announced it, with our lives, loud enough that the rest of humanity couldn't be taken cheap. And the second thing, the bigger thing, the thing Vorsan understood in that medical facility, was the lesson. The Dominion's entire 10,000-year machine ran on the certainty that defenders break, that conquest is cheap, that every candle accepts the snuffer. And Kestrel Station proved that wasn't true of humanity. 800 ordinary soldiers, not elites, not heroes, leftovers, had shown the Dominion that humans, when they're standing in a doorway, do not break. And that lesson changed the Dominion's whole calculation about the human core. Because if 800 garrison troops cost them 12 worlds worth of soldiers for one doorway, what would the core worlds cost? What would Earth cost? The road to humanity, the Dominion now understood, was not a road of cheap conquests and accepted snuffers. It was a road where every doorway cost more than a dozen ordinary worlds, defended by a species that did not break. And an empire that runs on conquest being cheap cannot afford a road like that. The Dominion stopped. Not immediately, not dramatically, but in the months and years after Kestrel Station, the Dominion's push toward the human core, the invasion that Tit had been meant to stage, slowed and faltered and finally halted. Because the math had changed. The Dominion War Council, weighing the cost of the road to Earth against the staggering price 800 ordinary humans had charged for a single doorway, reached the conclusion that the conquest of humanity would cost more than the Dominion could afford. Not because humanity was stronger. Because humanity was expensive. Because we'd proven at Kestrel Station that we didn't break, and a species that doesn't break makes every conquest a Kestrel Station, and no empire, not even one 10,000 years old, can afford a galaxy of Kestrel Stations. Vorsan told me this himself before they sent the 31 of us home. My War Council has reviewed the cost of Kestrel Station, he said, and extrapolated it across the human core. The numbers are not survivable. To conquer humanity doorway by doorway at the price your 800 set, it would break the Dominion. Not metaphorically. Actually, We would spend ourselves to nothing taking your worlds, and the other powers of the galaxy, who fear us only because we are strong, would fall on a weakened dominion and end us. He looked at me. So we will not come. Your 800 did not just hold a doorway, Sergeant. They priced the entire human species out of the Dominion's reach. We came to conquer you, and you taught us in one day and one night that conquering you would cost us our empire. There is no version of that math where we proceed. You are too expensive to take. And so you are free not because we spared you, but because 800 of your ordinary soldiers made you unaffordable. He was quiet a moment. I have spent 300 years snuffing candles. I did not know until Kestrel Station that there was a kind of fire you cannot snuff, one that, the harder you press it, the more it costs you, until pressing it at all becomes impossible. Your people are that fire. I will carry that knowledge to the end of my life. And I wanted the survivors to carry it home. You won. Not the battle. The war. The one that never had to be fought because 800 soldiers on a frontier rock made it a war the Dominion could not afford to start. They sent us home, the 31 of us. Back across the lines to the human core, to the worlds we'd held the door for, the 400 million who hadn't known we existed, and now knew nothing else. Because the story had gotten out. Of course it had. Our distress signals, the Dominion's own records, the staggering casualty figures, it had all reached the human core, and by the time the 31 survivors came home, Kestrel Station was the most famous battle in human history. 800 ordinary garrison troops who'd held a doorway against 100-to-1 army and in dying, priced the entire species out of the Dominion's reach. We were heroes. We were legends. We were the wall that saved humanity. And I have spent the rest of my life being uncomfortable with that, because it isn't quite right, and Colonel Reyes would have hated it, and somebody who was there should set it straight. We weren't heroes. I keep saying it because it's the truest thing I know about Kestrel Station. We were leftovers. Frontier garrison, the soldiers nobody groomed for greatness, ordinary people who'd chosen safe postings for the steady pay. There was nothing special about us. That's the whole point. That's the thing the Dominion never understood and the thing the legends get wrong. It didn't take heroes to hold that door. It took ordinary humans, standing in a doorway, who did the math and found their own survival lighter than 400 million strangers, and who held on, scared for each other, one reload at a time, all the way to the end. The Dominion thought defenders break because defenders value their own lives above the fight. And for 900 worlds, that was true, and surrendering was the right and human thing to do. But the Dominion had never met a defender standing in a doorway, where the math inverts, where your own survival weighs against everyone behind you. And faced with that math, 800 ordinary humans, no braver than anyone, made the only choice that math allows. No surrender, no retreat, hold the door, make it cost, reload one last time. That's not heroism. It's something stranger and more ordinary, and I think, more important. It's the discovery that there's a thing most humans will do, when it's real and the math is right, that no empire's strategy can account for value the people behind them above their own lives, and hold the line for strangers who will never know their names. The Dominion had 10,000 years of certainty that no one does that. 800 leftovers on a cold gray rock proved them wrong, and saved a species, and most of them died doing it, scared for each other. I'm old now telling this. The last of the 31, I think the others have passed, one by one over the long years. I outlived them all, which feels wrong, and I've spent my old age doing the one thing I think I'm actually for, which is making sure the story gets told right. There's a memorial at Kestrel Station now. The Dominion never came back, never came near the human core again, the road priced out of their reach forever by what 800 ordinary soldiers charged for one doorway. So the station sits, rebuilt on its cold gray ridge, and there's a wall there, and on the wall are 800 names. Colonel Imani Reyes, Private Tam, who was scared and couldn't keep going and kept going anyway until it killed him. All 800. The leftovers. The wall that saved humanity. My grandchildren ask me about it. They've grown up in a free human core, a humanity the Dominion decided it could not afford to conquer, and they know Kestrel Station the way you know a legend, the heroic 800, the glorious last stand. And I always correct them, gently, the way I'm correcting you, because the legend is good but the truth is better. It wasn't glorious. It was scared people on a wall, reloading, dying for strangers one last time all night long. And it wasn't heroes. It was leftovers, ordinary as anyone, who happened to be standing in the doorway when the test came, and who turned out when it was real to be enough. People ask me what the lesson is. And here's the one I give them, the one I believe, the one Colonel Reyes died proving. The Dominion conquered 900 worlds because they understood something true about living things, that we value our own survival, and that when the fight is hopeless, we surrender to stay alive and there's no shame in it. That's real. That's most of the story of war. But there's a thing they didn't understand, a thing they had no category for after 10,000 years, and it's the most human thing there is. Sometimes, when it's real, when the math is right, when there are enough people behind you and you're the only thing between them and the dark, sometimes a human being weighs their own survival against the strangers behind them and finds their own survival lighter. And a human who's made that weighing does not break, cannot break. We'll hold the door scared for each other, reloading one last time, until there's nothing left to reload. That's the fire the Dominion couldn't snuff. Not courage, most of us weren't brave. Not strength, we were leftovers. Just the ordinary, stubborn, world-changing human refusal to be the one who lives while everyone behind you dies. No surrender, no retreat. When it's real and it's us, and we're the door, humanity reloads one last time. And it turns out that's the one thing in the whole galaxy that 10,000 years of empire never learned how to beat. They built an empire on the certainty that everyone breaks. 800 ordinary soldiers, standing in a doorway, proved there's a kind of human that doesn't and priced a species out of reach forever.